Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Brent again. Today, I'd like to reflect a little bit with you on the story that we find in Genesis 32 about a man named Jacob. Now, you remember Jacob. Jacob was the grandson of Abraham. It was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Jacob was a twin. His brother was Esau. But Jacob was a kind of guy who kind of had to have things his own way. And he was very good at manipulating things to get his own way. He had manipulated his father to give him the blessing. He had kind of cheated his brother out of his birthright. And he had then gone out of country and met his uncle Laban, and he negotiated with him for his daughter and his two daughters, and actually that Jacob ended up marrying. And then he negotiated again to make sure that he got lots of flocks and herds. And then he left Laban and was heading back to his original home country, where it would be known as the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. We pick up this story where Jacob is coming back, and he is just about ready to cross over the Jabbok River, which is kind of the border that goes into Canaan. And he realizes that he's going through the countryside that his brother Esau, whom he had cheated years and years ago, about 20 years ago, that he was going through his countryside that he controlled. And so Jacob was trying to manipulate things, and he sent gifts on ahead to Esau to make sure that Esau would receive him favorably. But in that process, he realized that he was in deep trouble. If Esau didn't look on him favorably and welcome him, that Esau could stop him and could just wipe out his whole family. So he was in deep trouble. So at that point in time, he called on God and said, "God, save me." Well, after that prayer, Jacob sent his family on ahead of him across the Jabbok River, and he was left alone on the side of the creek. And then he met a man. And we look at this, and we look from Scripture, and we see that this was a representation of God. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but this was God came and he wrestled with Jacob. And they wrestled all night. And Jacob has been so accustomed to getting things his own way. He was wrestling with God and wrestling with God, and he all night long. And finally, he thought that he had God, and he had actually won. And he didn't realize that he was God at the time until all of a sudden he thought he had won the fight, and then the angel touched his hip, and it put it out of joint, and he was no longer able to fight. And then he says, okay, he recognized that this was not just a normal human, that this was a representation of God. And he says, he asked God, "I need you to bless me." And the angel said, "Well, what's your name?" And he says, "My name is Jacob." And this is Brent's paraphrase. The angel says, "Yeah, you're right. You are Jacob. And Jacob means the deceiver. And you have been deceiving people all your life. But now I will bless you, and I'm going to give you a new name. And your new name is going to be Israel. And Israel means the one who struggled with God." And she says, and the scripture says he struggled with God and men and won. Jacob thought he had won the fight with God with his own strength. But God says, "No, I'm going to struggle with you, and I'm going to go ahead of you, and I will bless you, but be very clear about this. I'm the one that's in charge. I'm the one that is looking after things, and I will bless you and bless your future, but it's not going to be on your terms. It's going to be on my terms." And from that day forward, Jacob walked with a limp, because just to remind him that he had struggled with God, and he thought he had things done his way, but God was ultimately in control. And ultimately, that was a reminder of him that he struggled with God, and God listened to him, but God was in control. Now, the rest of the story is that Jacob did go into the land of Canaan, but they didn't actually take possession of it as a nation for another 400 years. God had the big picture in mind. So even though Jacob was looking at the short term, saying, "Okay, yes, I've struggled with God, and I've won, and he did actually bless me," but he walks with a limp, realizing that, the way that he was doing things, where he was trying to manipulate things himself, was not God's way. God had a much better way of doing things, and God went before him and blessed him. And Esau came, and he was very friendly to Jacob, and that could only have been God's doing, because the Esau that Jacob knew was one who would have taken revenge. God went ahead of him and paved the way for him to go back into the land of Canaan because God had a much larger plan. We sometimes look around us and we see things that are like, okay, this is bad. I don't quite understand what's going on here with this, and we try and figure things out and do things that we think are the way that we should be done, and we try and figure it out ourselves, and we don't always grab a hold of God and say, God, I need your help with this. Whether it be COVID, whether it be a bad diagnosis, whether it be upcoming surgery, whether it be the loss of someone we loved, through all those things, those are kind of wake up moments where we can meet God, and God says, you know what, I am here with you, and I will struggle with you through this thing, and we will walk through this together, but keep in mind, I have got things under control. You think you've got it all figured out, or you feel weak and broken, that's okay. I'm with you. God says, I am with you in those moments where you don't know what to do. We can take great comfort in that as we look and we say, okay, God, we don't always know what's going on with it. There's a lot of upheaval and turmoil around us in our country and in our lives where we just don't feel like we've got control of things. But God does. And then I was just at the Global Leadership Summit last weekend with the rest of our Faith East staff, and one of the speakers reminded us, we may not have control of everything, but we can take control of the things that we do have control of, and we trust God for the rest of it. So we can do things like we can social distance, and we can be safe, we can wear masks when it comes to the COVID thing, but really God has got the bigger picture in mind. And so many things happen because of that. Even with the things with COVID, that there are things that God is using that to draw people to himself. And God uses all kinds of various ways to do that. So we just trust him that he's got the bigger picture in mind. We maybe can't see it, but God does. And he wants us to have a relationship with him. When we trust in him, we can know that he has got a better plan for all of us, and he's got the big picture in mind. We may not see it immediately, but God's got a plan that's going to expand his kingdom and is going to bring more people to know him. And that's really what it's all about. So trust God through all these things that we're dealing with, and we can know that he has a bigger plan for us. So take comfort in that and have a great week.